The ring fight. ISO Server 2004 versus everyone else. Well, at least all of the major firewall players in this game. What I wanted to do was to dedicate a single video to explaining the differences, the advantages and disadvantages with ISO Server as compared to all the other major vendors out there for the firewall. I find this especially essential for ISO Server because of all the reasons I explained in some of the previous nuggets, where you're going to be walking in to a lot of bias as to what firewall products are meant to be firewalls and what firewall products are not meant to be. And you're going to have a lot of ammunition when you're, for instance, going against a Check Point person or going against a Cisco PIX person. And the reason why is not because these people are mad at you or you know, they hate Microsoft, because everybody in some way uses Microsoft inside of their networks. The reason why is because people stick with what they know. People stick with what they've been marketed to. I'm the perfect example of that. When I walk into a network, I am looking to design it, and I'm looking to use solely Cisco equipment. And the reason why, and at least when I'm looking at the network infrastructure side, the reason why is because I know Cisco. I've done Cisco for many, many years. And when I'm looking at trying to put equipment in there, I want to use what I know, what I've become familiar with. And of course, I'm always going to spin it a little bit more when I'm going on a Cisco switch versus the 3Com switch. I'm going to say, well, you know, Cisco has this, that, and the other. Who knows if 3Com has it? I don't. I don't know anything about 3Com. I just have a little bias because I know how Cisco switches work. So that's the reason that I decided to do this video, because I need you to know a little bit about each one of these vendors, their high points, because some of these people do have high points that ISO Server can't meet. And some of their low points, because there's some places where ISO Server exceeds what they're capable of doing. These vendors did not become the top of the industry just because they were first to market. They became the top because they're very good. They do have good points of their products, and it's good to know those and some of the weaknesses of the product as well. So that's the first question I'm going to answer, is can't we just all get along? The answer is surprising. Sometimes, yes, we can. In a very large or enterprise network scenario, there's going to be multiple firewall products. And I guess I'm almost taking the thunder of that first step there. So I'll just leave it at that. And by the way, I've done this before, where you dress up like this and you go at each other. It's not that fun. I ended up on my back in a matter of 2 minutes, and I just wiggled. I couldn't roll over. I was stuck. So anyhow, the fight number one we're going to talk about is the price tag. What are these different products priced? And I'm going to splice that into each one of these, talking about when we get into Check Point, what a typical Check Point firewall costs, or Cisco PIX, what that product line costs. And I'll splice that in as we go. Then we'll take each of the major 4 vendors that are out there: Check Point, PIX, NetScreen, and SonicWall. Each of the 4 major players, each with their own little niche market. So we'll hit the high points of each one of those and then compare ISO Server and show where ISO Server measures up. One more quick note before we get going. For those of you that are studying for the certification exam, this is the first set of content that I will designate as non-certification material. And the reason is pretty obvious. Microsoft, like every other vendor in the world, does not want their material testing on other vendors' products. They don't want you to know about the vendors. And that's not solely to Microsoft. You'll never find, for instance, Juniper mentioned in any Cisco curriculum either, other than some bad light. So if you are studying for the exam, you may want to come back to this at the end. For those of you that will be doing this in the real world, I highly encourage you to go through this, because it's really good content to understand this competition group. So we've come to the infamous question: can't we just all get along? I mean, can't we just use all kinds of different vendor equipment in our network and everybody work together happily? The answer is yes and no. In large enterprise-style networks, the answer is sure, because they have the budget and the enormous network size to truly design their network in the layered approach, the onion that I've been talking about in a lot of the previous videos. We have the outer security parameter, and as you come in, you get into like a DMZ or kind of an inner security parameter, and you could use different vendor equipment for every single one of these layers. And actually, that'd be the best approach, because, for instance, let's say we use Microsoft everywhere, and then there was a vulnerability discovered in Microsoft. Well, at that point, you pretty much have that weakness throughout your network. Whereas if you use PIX everywhere and there's a vulnerability in PIX, you have the same problem. So by combining different vendor equipments all the way through this onion, you end up with different layers of protection at each one with no single point of compromise, meaning no single flaw of a specific vendor can be compromised everywhere. Now, in small to medium businesses, SMB, probably not. Meaning we probably will not get along. They don't have the budget or the network size to do the layered approach. They're looking for the all-in-one killer product line, like I mentioned down here, that does everything, that does that firewall package, that does the security for their entire network. I mean, when you're up here, you could throw out a number like, well, we need a security implementation, it's going to cost $100,000, and people will kind of blink and go, okay, well, what's that going to give us? You do that here, and you're going to be carrying people out on ambulances. They're like, mortgage the business for our corporate security network strategy. That's not going to happen. They're looking for $5,000, maybe $10,000 max. That's their kind of budgets. So we come to that question, is there a killer product line? Meaning the all-in-one ultimate package, best of the best of every single scenario? And the answer is no. No way. There's no single vendor that has the best of all areas. Rather, each vendor has their own little niche that they're great at. For example, for PIX firewalls, they're fantastic at packet filtering, light speed, ASIC technology, very quick, and they combine that with the fact that they use a common operating system that everybody can understand, at least everybody that's in the Cisco world. People that aren't need specialized training to do that. Checkpoint, SonicWall, they all have these different niche markets that they meet. And then you have Microsoft that brings their ISA server along the way, which really has some niche markets that it meets. But the reason I bring this point up is because it's one of the major advantages of ISA server. ISA server does a lot of stuff. Sometimes it's not the best of it, but it does it nonetheless. I guess the best example I can draw for you is, let's say we take the package of Microsoft Office. Now my guess is that you have Microsoft Office installed on the very computer that you're listening to me on right now. And the reason why is because it's the ultimate package, meaning it gives you a word processor. Is it the best word processor that's out there in the world today? Probably not, but it's a good word processor. Then you have a PowerPoint utility, a slideshow utility. Is it the best one out there? No, probably not, but it is a good slideshow utility. Do you get my drift? Do you see where I'm going with this? You have all these products that aren't the best of class in any means. However, the fact that number one, they're all there. And number two, they're at a decent price point. And number three, they all interoperate with each other, meaning I can save a Word document and then import it into PowerPoint and so on. I mean, that cross-compatibility is a great thing. And now we see one of the major advantages of ISA server. It's a firewall. Is it the best firewall possible out there on the market? My opinion, no, it's not. However, it gives you that firewall capability with caching server. Does any other product line for the price give you those two things packaged together? No, they don't. Add in a VPN concentrator, a VPN server. Does any other product line for a decent price point give you that? The answer is no. If you have the mega budget, the trillion-dollar enterprise budget, then sure, use ISA server for its caching and VPN capabilities or whatever you want to use it for. And then pair it with, best of the best of Checkpoint, best of the best of PIX because you can afford it. In a small to medium business where you're looking for the ultimate all-in-one package like Office-style compatibility, that's where ISA server shines. So I don't want to give you the idea that ISA server is the mediocre of everything. I feel like I communicated that with saying, Microsoft doesn't have the best word processor or the best slideshow program, but ISA server is not the mediocre of everything. It definitely has its shining points. It has its features that nobody else can do. But you're going to see, for example, that if you put ISA server for packet filtering versus the hardware ASICs of Checkpoint or the Cisco PIX, then there's no competition. For packet filtering, Cisco PIX and Checkpoint blow away ISA server. They've got hardware-based packet filtering, which is very fast, and software-based packet filtering just can't keep up with it. Now, when we start talking about application layer filtering, which is what we need from a lot of our firewalls, that's where you start seeing ISA servers step up and say, hey, I've got application filters that you two don't have at all. You don't support that capability. And that's a special niche that ISA server fits into. So I'll expand more on that as we go throughout this. But we come to the first ring fight. ISA server 2004 versus Checkpoint firewall. Checkpoint is the firewall giant in the market, and I should say the security giant. They own 48% of the market share when it comes to firewalls. They are in, I would say, a good 96% of all Fortune 100 companies. I mean, they're a huge player here. And because of that, I want to spend the most time talking about them. Now, I will first off tell you that I am not a Checkpoint guy. I know the basics of them. I've seen the interface. I've played with them here and there. But I am definitely not certified. So when it comes to any bias that I have, I may leave something out because this is just from the research I've done, reading books, looking at website, reading marketing material, that kind of thing. So if you are a Checkpoint person and I leave something out, feel free to email me on that or something like that, because it's not something I'm doing on purpose. I just want to give you the high points. Checkpoint is designed around a software. This is their newest software called Checkpoint NG. Stands for Next Generation Security Package. It's kind of like IP version 6. A lot of people call that IPNG as the next version, next generation of TCP/IP. And what is in that NG security package is VPN1 and Firewall1 software products. You can see up here on this book that I chose to take this picture of, Checkpoint NG VPN1/Firewall1. It's kind of like when I say Office, it includes Word and Excel. That's kind of what I mean when I say Checkpoint NG. It includes VPN, concentrator capabilities, and firewall capabilities. Now, this is a software-based firewall, and it installs on top of many operating systems. It can run on Windows NT. It can run on Windows 2000, Linux, Solaris. Nokia has their own little proprietary Unix operating system. It can run on top of that. Runs on the IBM AIX. That's an advantage of Checkpoint. It installs on any operating system. ISA Server only installs on Microsoft Windows 2000 or Windows 2003. Now, to flip it the other way, that's an advantage to ISA Server because it truly integrates with the operating system instead of using the operating system as a carrier, if you will. For example, with Checkpoint, it's kind of like it doesn't care if it's Windows 2000, Red Hat, or whatever. It installs and it does its thing. It does its firewall thing on top of that operating system. The operating system's invisible. Great thing about it is you can use it on any operating system. ISA Server installs on top of Windows, but then takes a lot of that functionality of Windows and integrates it into the ISA Server product. Let me give you an example. ISA Server can integrate right into your Active Directory scheme, your user database and so on. It can tie right into that, using that for authentication purposes. It can use Windows Remote Access Services to gain a lot of the configuration. It can use the familiar wizard interface of Windows. It doesn't have all its own interface that you've never seen before, like Checkpoint does. If you've never seen it before, the first time you see it, you're like, whoa, that's new. So it integrates into the operating system versus just rests on top of it. Now, Checkpoint is licensed around the number of IP addresses that you use. And I'll show you specific price points in a moment. But that could range from the low end of maybe $400 or $500 to as an entry point in, up to around 500 IP addresses where you're running a price tag of around $20,000, $25,000 for your Checkpoint firewall. So it is licensed based on how many concurrent IP sessions you have running through it. On the flip side, ISA Server allows as many sessions as that box can handle. There's no limit to IP addresses or to users or anything like that. I'll show you the two different versions of ISA Server and where those stand in the grand scheme of things. But it is an all-in-one package. You don't have to buy extra stuff. Checkpoint, on the other hand, has a lot of the additional features that do require licensing. For example, Checkpoint supports something known as VPN quality of service, which means you can prioritize packets through a VPN connection. Certain packets have priority over others, and they'll advertise that. ISA Server does not do VPN quality of service, and I'll talk more about what that could be used for and why it's not that big a deal, at least today. But the thing is, Checkpoint doesn't include that functionality. You have to buy an extra VPN quality of service module. It's called Floodgate 1. Just like we have Firewall 1, VPN 1, they have one called Floodgate 1 that adds the quality of service functionality. It does not support caching by default, web caching or web filtering based on URL strings or things like that. You can buy add-on modules and add-on servers that you can integrate into that, and ISA Server includes that out of the box. Web caching is a default functionality. You can filter on URLs out of the box. It can read deep inspections on HTTP packets, prevent certain HTTP attacks, prevent certain websites. Now, if you do want to go into a web filtering functionality, meaning filtering the non-appropriate sites from your company. People can't surf to sports sites or adventure sites or pornography sites during business hours. I should say at the company, right? So you're filtering these things. There's products out there like WebSense is one of the primary players in that market that has a special server that you can buy that comes pre-installed with all these different schemes in place to filter certain websites. Now, both Checkpoint and IsoServer can integrate into that. I can say IsoServer tie into WebSense, and it will do that. Same thing with Checkpoint. You can buy extra solutions and add them in there. So when it comes to feature versus feature, Checkpoint does have more features, but you have to buy them all. It's all separate purchases, whereas IsoServer has the vast majority of them included out of box. Well, let's look to the almighty $sign to find out where Checkpoint falls in this grand scheme of things. Checkpoint cost starts at $399 for branch offices, and I put limited on there because that uses, instead of the VPN1 and things like that, it uses something known as VPN1 Edge, which is kind of a limited version of everything. Instead it does VPN connections and things like that, but it doesn't have application layer filtering. It won't allow you to publish servers behind it to make them accessible from the outside. And it does have some feature sets allowing outside access into the inside network, but very, very limited, as you might expect from that style of firewall, the low end. That will go up to around $24,000 plus for the enterprise solution. That plus sign is a little shaky because that's where you start looking at the extra modules and extra solutions you're running into and you're adding to your network. Now, when you're looking at a network of about 100 users, that's where you see the price tag going from $5,000 to $5,500. And that's just for the basic firewall functionality. Now, there is a free VPN client that they have called Secure Remote, and that anyone can download, anyone can use. However, it doesn't offer a lot of the kind of premium VPN services, meaning it doesn't allow you to have that quarantine feature to isolate users whenever their client does not meet the specifications that you've required. Checkpoint calls that client configuration verification. They also have a little personal firewall that comes on there. When you compare that to IsoServer, for instance, the Secure Remote, IsoServer includes that functionality out of box. You don't have to buy a VPN client that does that. The one that Checkpoint sells is called Secure Client, and it's about $2,300 for 100 IP addresses. As you go up, that price increases. Tie that in, or couple that in with the fact that you need VPN client access licenses for their server. For example, you might have, it works just like, for instance, Microsoft does with Windows and Windows Server licensing. You have the license to run the server, right? That's your server license, just like you have Checkpoint NG. You have that license on there. You then have the client out here that has to have the client license installed on it. That's that secure client if you're buying that client. And then you have to have a client access license, if you will, to connect between these two. And they sell those in bundles for Checkpoint. It's a bundle of 25 licenses, or 50, or 100, or 250. And then they do have an unlimited license, which costs quite a bit for client access licenses, that you have to buy on top of that. So there's really 3 points of licensing on that, whereas when you compare that to IsoServer, IsoServer just has one, the IsoServer. You have the VPN client that's included with Windows, and you can group that into your Windows client licensing. The Windows VPN client does provide that quarantine specification, and Windows does include a personal firewall. So all those features that you would have to buy extra in Checkpoint kind of comes with the IsoServer and Windows package. Now, I can already sense a little bias coming in there, and I want to keep this as bias-free as I can. You do still pay the cost for Windows. I mean, when we're talking about VPN client licensing, and I'm saying, oh yeah, it just comes with it with IsoServer, you're buying a license for Windows to run Windows on your PC. So I guess you could bundle it in that cost. And to Microsoft's, I guess, high point, a positive point, is that you're buying that license anyway. So essentially, the VPN client functionality is free with purchase, if you will. I guess I'm not a marketing guy, so I don't have a nice spin on things, but you get my point. Now the server cost itself, I'll show you a little bit about ISOServer here. You have $1,200 for the standard edition and $5,200 for the enterprise edition. And that's the software. And that's, those prices may differ by the time you're hearing this. I just pulled those prices off from a reseller account that I have. And that's the prices I get them for. So, I don't have any big discounts or anything from Microsoft if I do bulk or something like that. So that's pretty much what you'll pay for retail. Now, that's for the software. You can buy an ISA appliance from, I just grabbed Hewlett-Packard as one of the vendors. That is a pre-installed system with all the windows, it's the appliance version for $2,500, and that includes all the hardware and software that you'll need. So that's about it. Now, I do want to make sure I mention what's the difference. What's the difference between the standard edition and the enterprise edition? Well, the primary difference is the redundancy and how big are you looking to get. The standard edition, why you see that huge price difference, is because it's meant to be the all-in-one box. All-in-one. Now, that doesn't mean you can't couple it with another standard edition and use, like, for instance, Microsoft load balancing or the system that allows you to pair two servers as one. That's possible, but most people, if they're going to do that, will go with the Enterprise Edition. The Enterprise Edition allows the functionality that we'll later learn to be called an array, where you can now pair multiple servers, and I should say, beyond that, you can put multiple servers into an array and allow them to function as one server. Instead of being limited to that one box, one hard drive for caching, one point of failure in your network, you have this array, and it distributes the cache to where when you download web pages from the internet, it will splice it between all the servers. It will automatically load balance between those two. You can get up to 32 servers paired together into an array and allow that functionality in there. In addition, ISOServer Standard Edition does not use any more than, and I know this sounds kind of funny, but it doesn't use any more than 4 processors, 4 CPUs on a motherboard. Whereas the Enterprise Edition can really get into the unlimited processors. And, a couple years ago, I'd be like, ha, 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 4 CPUs, who's going to use that? But nowadays, people are putting multiple motherboards into single systems and putting 8 CPUs on each motherboard. It's getting stupid. So Enterprise Edition can actually use all of those CPUs. It has unlimited memory, whereas this has a 2 gigabyte limit on memory of how much memory it can harness and use for that application. So really, you see the difference in the name. Standard, all-in-one, single box. Enterprise being the ultimate array system, multiple load balancing, multiple points of failure eliminated by having all these servers back each other up. Well, let me just make sure I hit all the high points. I think that I've got most of them. Checkpoint does not support web caching out of the box. I already mentioned that. You have to buy a module or a third-party add-on. Checkpoint can install on top of most operating systems, which gives it that advantage, but it can't integrate with, well, it doesn't really truly integrate with any of those other operating systems. Whereas ISOServer installs only on Windows 2000, 2003, and integrates with it. Application layer filtering provided by NG Application Intelligence. They just added this to the Checkpoint firewalls, and that's where they can look at the application layer data and do some filtering. It's a fairly new feature to Checkpoint's list of features. ISOServer's had it since ISOServer 2000, so it's been around for quite some time, and they've continued to enhance it. So ISOServer is a little more feature-rich on the application intelligence side than the Checkpoint. Now, again, if some of you are in the Checkpoint side of the world and you're like, hey, a new module just came out, that's I have not seen anything like that. So there may be a new thing out, but I haven't seen it as of yet. The one that I saw was a little bit more limited than ISOServer. They have similar VPN functionality. Secure Client is an extra client purchase for every single client and the added expense, and that's what adds the quarantine-like functions and personal firewall capabilities, whereas ISOServer has that included. There's no VPN quality of service on ISOServer, and Checkpoint does allow that. And let me explain that just a little bit. VPN quality of service means that you can prioritize traffic within the VPN, meaning if I have an IP phone at home, an IP telephone, and I start communicating using voice over IP, you might want to prioritize that over, say, intranet surfing over a VPN. ISOServer doesn't allow that. Checkpoint does, but as of right now, it's more of a marketing feature than anything else. And the reason I say that is because VPNs, by their very nature, are not quality of service enabled because they cross the internet, and the internet does not have quality of service. So unless you have some sort of special agreement with your service provider, which is pretty expensive to do, that VPN quality of service is more of a feel-good feeling rather than actual functionality, because once you send it outside of your house or your branch office, it gets treated just like anything else going across the internet. Now, a small feature, but IsoServer supports something known as SSL tunneling rather than SSL bridging. It supports both of them, actually, but SSL tunneling allows it to keep a secure connection from the client to the server. SSL is Secure Socket Layer, for use for secure web browsing and so on. Checkpoint supports SSL bridging only, which means it decrypts the packet when it gets to the Checkpoint firewall and then re-encrypts it before it sends it out. Now, it may sound like a moot point, and for many people it is, but it is an extra layer of security because if you have, say, managers that are sending secure information or employees surfing online banking, they want to know that it's getting to the web server secure. And if your firewall's unencrypting it, there's a potential, not for you, but for the guy sitting next to you, another admin that's on the network, for them to actually tap into that data and see what's going on. To explore employee data that they're not supposed to get into. There is a lot of administrator fraud, if you will, that's going on with network admins. So it's not, again, not you, it's the guy sitting next to you. But SSL tunneling allows it to be secure through the firewall. There's advantages to both. SSL tunneling keeps it secure but doesn't inspect the packet. So you could unleash an attack on a client machine using SSL. SSL bridging inspects it, but has to decrypt it in order to do that, so you have that point of decryption on the network that could be a vulnerability. Well, now let's move on to the Cisco PICs. And don't worry, I won't spend as much time on every single one of these, because now we've hit the key features, I'll be able to say, hey, this one does it, this one doesn't, or vice versa. So Cisco does top the market on firewall appliances. Checkpoint gets it on firewall software, and they are have a little bit more of a firewall market share than Cisco does, but Cisco is on top with the appliance platform, and that's 34%. Cisco PICs costs widely vary. I have a Cisco PICs 501 sitting right next to me. I love this little guy. It's a little micro, smaller than I'm trying to think. Looks like, I guess I have nothing to compare that to. It is a small little box. I would say about 6 inches by 6 inches, and that is in about an inch thick. Okay, I'm done talking about that 501. The 501 is meant for very small markets, and they have like a 10 user license or an unlimited license, which is that price difference there. Very limited in the amount of throughput it's able to handle. Primarily meant to be a 10 meg per second or less type firewall. As we go up in platform, you see the model numbers increase, and you see how much these things cost increase. Primarily, you start seeing the range coming up here because you do end up licensing VPN connections. You also end up licensing how many interfaces they support. Every interface that you add is another license. So the more networks you have, the more the cost is on top of that. Now, this is not something that runs on top of Windows or anything like that. It is a proprietary operating system developed by Cisco. The advantage of that is that's considered a hardened operating system, meaning nobody knows about that operating system. Nobody really uses that other than the Cisco PICs. So it kind of has a built-in security because it's not just a normal operating system that people can play with. On the flip side, nobody knows that operating system, as in you'll have to learn it if you want to really work with the PICs. A lot of what you'll do is a text-based configuration. It's like configuring a Linux or Unix world. You have to learn this new operating system, and there's a huge training curve to do that. Now, in their defense, Cisco has created something known as the PDM, the PICs Device Manager, which is a web-based GUI allowing you to do a lot of the major things. However, if you really want to get in and be able to tweak and tune things, even Cisco will tell you a lot of it has to be done from the text-based operating system. Now, PICs and IsoServer can do application layer filtering. It's done through something known as fix-up protocols in the PICs, and they release new fix-up protocols with their different PICs versions of the software that allows it to adapt to the new applications, like H323 fix-up protocols and so on. IsoServer has a lot of application filters out of the box, and you can download add-ons as they come out. it's also designed to where other people can write their own application filters for the firewall. So if you maybe get a popular application, they could write a plugin for IsoServer that allows that popular application to work through the IsoServer firewall platform. Now, Pix has that VPN quarantine, that enforcement functionality, meaning if the client doesn't meet these certain prerequisite specifications, it will be able to limit their access or cut them off from connecting to the VPN. And that is a free VPN client with support contract. Cisco calls that SmartNet, and it is a pricey support contract that gives you free support for a year, free upgrades on the software for a year, and gives you free access to the VPN client. So that support contract is a purchase, but then you get the VPN client free. IsoServer, on the other hand, has the VPN included with Windows, and the setup is a piece of cake because it's very wizard-based. Now, that being said, the VPN setup is very difficult on the Pix. Now, they do have the GUI that allows you to do it, but to tweak it, I can't do it without looking at a reference books, and I've done it 1,000 times almost on a Cisco Pix firewall. There's so many pieces to it that just, I mean, it really starts getting one of the things that's very difficult to do. Pix web caching is an add-on feature using the pricey Cisco Content Engine. That's not a cheap purchase. It does not support web caching out of the box. Now we come to IsoServer versus NetScreen, and I must confess I do not know much about NetScreen at all, other than the name. I've heard the name a few times. NetScreen ranks second in the security appliance market, and that is with 16% of the market share. It was recently acquired by Juniper Networks, and that is why I probably don't know too much about it, is because it is a kind of a focused platform on nothing but security. And it seems like just about everything may change now that Juniper has acquired it. Once the acquisition happens, you never know what will happen to those product lines. Now, the cost goes all over the place. NetScreen, the 5XP, which is kind of like the Soho style device, starts at $500 and goes up to the NetScreen 5200 with a gazillion models in between. There's like the 5GT, the 5XT, 5XP Elite, Elite. Elite. I'm just reading through their marketing sheet here, the NetScreen 25. And I mean, you just go all the way down this list until you get to the $100,000 NetScreen 5200. And as you go up in those product lines, you just go up in total capacity, how many interfaces. And then when you're in that $100,000 range, you're really looking at service provider, enterprise, enormous mega box that does everything. Just about everything's an add-on cost, I found, with NetScreen. It seems like the only thing it comes in with is a firewall capability. So you have to add on the VPN and IDS, that's intrusion detection services, into that box. Now, NetScreen, I'm hesitant to even rank it as a competitor. And not because it's horrible or anything like that. Like I said, I don't know too much about it. But it's more of just a firewall solution, and anything that you add on will throw it out of the price range of IsoServer. IsoServer directly competes, I suppose you could say, with the NetScreen 200 series and below. That 200 series has a total throughput of about 550 megabytes or megabits per second maximum, whereas IsoServer can get a total throughput of 1.59 gigabits per second, which is a pretty big gap there. So in total throughput standards, IsoServer does beat it. However, NetScreen runs on top of those proprietary ASIC-based hardware platforms, so it will be faster in packet filtering. It can look at packets and move them faster. So where the throughput may be greater with IsoServer, the delay may be lessened, or I guess I should say the delay would be greater with IsoServer since it's software processing versus ASIC-based processing. NetScreen sells these little IDS boxes, little appliances that sit in front of mission-critical servers, and they're kind of like little tripwires, little laser tripwires that if somebody crosses it, it alerts, so, alarms go off, emails, pagers beep, and things like that. And it can actually even take action on top of that. Again, separate purchases as well. But that's why I kind of feel like it's not a direct competitor. It's almost like a different product series than the IsoServer. All their VPN client licenses cost extra. The connections are limited per platform, so based on the platform that you buy, you are limited to the number of VPN connections that each one of those can handle. With that being said, the NetScreen 200 can get up to 1,000 VPN tunnels going to it. Drop down to the NetScreen 50 and start going down. By the way, the NetScreen 200 is $10,000. Just to give you a price point on that. So it really is double the price of IsoServer in a lot of ways. But again, meets a different market. NetScreen offers no caching solution at all. They refer you to third parties to provide that, and that is one of the things that IsoServer does out of the box. Now, SonicWall is the final one that I'll talk about. They ranked 4th in the industry, and I couldn't find a book for them, so I had to grab a logo. SonicWall, it's one of those platforms I want to run up to and pinch its cheeks. You know, kind of like your grandmother did to you when you were a kid. Oh, you're so cute, pinch the little cheeks. That's kind of what I feel like doing with SonicWall. Not because it's so small and insignificant and a little child. SonicWall, it seems like, is popping up everywhere in the small to medium business. The big advantages it has is the cheap and speed that it offers. The cheapness and the speed. They're very cheap firewalls, and that's why I think you're starting to see them pop up everywhere, is they're kind of a plug-and-play firewall solution. You just pop it in, and it seems to work pretty well. I've never installed one personally, but it seems like every network I walk to, everybody's got one tucked away in a closet somewhere. Oh yeah, we've got a SonicWall protecting that part of the network. It's just a plug-and-play solution. It has, you know, that price range that you see right on the screen. Content filtering service is a subscription on a per-year basis, and that's kind of their WebSense, if you will, the ability to filter certain content coming in from the internet. You can buy add-ons for this, and this is more of a subscription basis for virus protection, graphic management systems, and enterprise management systems to manage multiple SonicWalls at a time, and support contracts. These are all add-on services. Now, the high points of the SonicWall is that there's 2 versions of the operating system. A standard, which is very limited, and the enhanced, the S/E. So when you're looking at SonicWall model numbers, they'll usually say, you know, you've got the SonicWall, you know, I don't know their model numbers off the top of my head, but, you know, say a SonicWall Pro or SonicWall, there's one, Soho 3, I've got their marketing material, Soho 3 or TZW, and you'll see like an S or an E after that name, just to let you know what version of the operating system it runs. Content filtering, caching are add-on fees, whereas a lot of the content filtering ability comes with IsoServer. Caching is included at no extra cost. SonicWall supports a proprietary VPN client that you have to buy. You also have to license each one of your VPN connections, so they have a client access license for that. Whereas IsoServer supports 1,000 VPN connections with the standard edition. It goes up to virtually unlimited with Enterprise. And usually if you get 1,000 VPN connections, you've maxed out that server or that connection anyway, at which point you go to the Enterprise platform. Overall, I would say SonicWall is good for, you know, it's like I picture the market in 3 segments. Let me grab my pen here. I kind of see like the ultra small, major, tiny market right over here. Tiny business. And, you know, and then right over here you have the Soho, small office, home office, and then you move up to the medium and the enterprise and so on. I can't draw. The enterprise. And you end up with kind of IsoServer going in between like that. I see SonicWall fitting in between like that. So you have the Sonic that fits right here. So that's the primary market. And not to say SonicWall can't scale to a large business environment, but it does do, you know, it does very well in the very small plug-and-play installations. Now, I need to add my disclaimer as we wrap things up, in that I am not trying to bash any of these other companies. For instance, I was just thinking, I didn't mean to pitch SonicWall like this small nobody, you know. If you've got like a house, maybe SonicWall will be useful there, you know. That's not what I'm trying to do. Each one of these have their own advantages. SonicWall being that great plug-and-play kind of firewall device. And it does VPNs as well. It's a solid product, just like all of these other vendors. They're at the top of the market for a reason. I just wanted to give you the advantages, some of the advantages that they had over IsoServer, and some of the advantages that IsoServer had over them. I pitched it as a ring fight just to be kind of amusing and funny. I'm not trying to say that IsoServer is the overall champion. They all fit their different niche areas. So can we just all get along? Absolutely not. This is not a place where no, we can. It depends on the type of network that you have and what kind of solution you're looking for. We saw the fight all the way through of the price tag. IsoServer is one of the lower cost appliance type devices, software-based filtering on the market. It does, for the price you pay and what you get, I think it's one of the most complete products that's out there. Now, we went through and talked about IsoServer, and we just went through vendor by vendor. I'm not going to rehash each and every one of them. Each one of them, as you saw, have their own niche markets, their own high points. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of where IsoServer fits in the grand scheme of things. And I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.